Okay, now let's continue our discussion about these theoretical components of management. We have discussed a number of topics so far. In the previous one, we discussed about the historical aspects, the management concept from the ancient period. And we also discussed a few other things aside from that, including the risk management as part of today's the management perspective developments in today's business landscape. And now we are going to continue that with the next one. There are several new ideas that management practitioners and scholars have developed in the management vocabulary. One of the things is the quality management, which is considered as critical for the business. Okay. Well, quality, you can refer to the ability of the product to deliver the product or service to deliver what it promises implicitly or explicitly. Okay, so that's what we mean by quality. Now, management or business practitioners actually agree that quality plays a critical role to convince the consumers to select their brands over the other brands in the competition. Okay, so it is one of the tools that the company believes to win the consumers in the competition. Okay, and therefore the companies would normally have the commitments to the products and services that brings the benefits for the firms. Okay, through meeting the consumers' needs and wants. Okay, and in this instance, there is an idea of why don't we also develop a process to keep improving our quality, because if quality is important, because since it helps us winning the consumers, then why don't we have the system or procedure to keep improving it? Okay. Therefore, the quality management has become another idea in management discipline. Okay, and in the Japanese tradition, they also develop what they call as Gemba Kaizen, that actually reflects the continuous improvement through process and waste reduction. Yeah, so they keep improving. Okay, to after they achieve something, they still keep thinking about what else can we do to improve it. Okay, of course the bar is getting higher for the firm to deliver. Okay, but that is the essence of the Gemba Kaizen or Kaizen. Yeah. Right. So the next one is the what we call as the Six Sigma, which is basically about the quality program to improve the customer experience, okay, to lower the costs, and of course to perform the other management improvements. Okay, so in other words, it is actually a problem-solving method using data. Okay, and data may include the statistical data to improve the customer satisfaction and to reduce the process variation. Okay? The process variation is considered as the key or the root cause that that we need to address in order to address the variation of the quality that we promise for the consumers. Okay, and then people also developed what we call as the Lean Sigma, which is basically a process to reduce waste. Okay, so in here, the idea of Lean Sigma is to eliminate the activities that do not add value to the process. Okay, so we streamline the process so that we can be more efficient. Okay, and combining these two, we have what we call as the Lean Six Sigma. Okay, which is basically about the process efficiency that the organization strives to do. Okay, so the Six Sigma again brings the idea of improvement and to the quality. Okay, in order to improve the customer experience of the business, and Lean brings the idea of streamlining the process. Okay, therefore a lot of people label these two as Lean Six Sigma. Okay, okay, now the next one here is what we call as the core competence. Core competence is basically about the unique capability that the organization has in the competition. Okay, it is unique and therefore it is also hard to copy. Okay, so we can actually, if you look at the diagram, we can actually consider the core competence as the something that is truly bringing the capability of the organization to compete. Okay, so we have the vertical line suggesting easy to copy and right up to the hard to copy, whilst on the other side we have the strategic requirements. Okay, where we have the essentials on at the lower level, and at the highest level we have what we call as the giving the unique advantage in the competition. Okay, so if you look at that, the easy to copy, the area of the capabilities are basically everything that the company needs to have in the competition. Okay, the one that sits, the capabilities that sits in the lower ends or easy to copy, and also the essentials but catching up, we call them as the cost of entry benefits, or meeting the threshold. Okay, the capabilities to meet the threshold in that industry. Okay, so if you are in food industry, making a tasty product is considered as the essential. Okay, you need to meet that, otherwise you are not going to be able to compete with the other firms. Okay, now if you develop something else, if you have the other things that that are hard to copy, okay, and that something is unique, you own that unique advantage, that is your core competence. That is the firm's core competence. Okay, so if you develop a tasty food with something else, you have the knowledge to deliver something else, for instance, okay, in the competition, then you have the core competence. Okay, right, so that's the core competence. The idea of core competence is basically looking into how the firm can strategically compete, okay, or win the competition. Okay, win the competition in the industry. Right, and experts suggest that the firms must have their core competence to help them delivering values for the consumers. All right, now more management jargon, by the way. We have the knowledge management, which is also critical. Okay, the companies that have strong knowledge management actually can consider that as their own capabilities. Okay, as that brings them to the competitive advantage. Okay, the knowledge management basically suggests that organizations benefit from shared knowledge. Okay, so they expect that the employees contribute to the knowledge development in the organization by conducting research and so on and so forth. Okay, and it is an asset that actually hard to imitate. So if your organization has that knowledge, you can consider that as hard to imitate. Okay, the product can be copied. The brand, maybe some people may develop a better value proposition for the brand. Okay, the machinery, the technologies can be copied. Okay, if we buy certain technologies, we adopt that technology. Okay, and and our competitors may also be able to buy or to adopt the same technology. However, the knowledge, okay, the know-how is an asset that is hard to imitate. Okay, and the issues in here is the knowledge development and also knowledge retention. Okay, now one of specifically when it comes to knowledge development, we understand that knowledge is developed through association of one knowledge to the other knowledge to build on or to create the next level of knowledge. Okay, how do we do that? We, of course, this requires us to share the knowledge, to have the knowledge sharing system in the organization, so we can evolve our collective knowledge to the next level. Okay, and we also need to consider in terms of knowledge retention from human resources management perspective. For instance, when someone resigns, for instance, that person may also bring the knowledge with away. Okay, so that is actually an issue that the organization need to think about when it comes to knowledge retention. Okay, how can we still keep the knowledge? Okay, well, in that regards, a number of things that people suggest from human resources management perspective, such as bringing again the ex-employees to have a forum of the ex-employees, a kind of consultation, if you like, to keep sharing their knowledge to us. Okay, right. So knowledge management is another topic in management where we develop the knowledge, we share the knowledge. Okay, and in saying that, we may also you may also observe whether people are willing to share their knowledge or not, and in the organization, because especially the job may become more and more competitive at the workplace. So it is the role of the organization to motivate, to encourage the employees to share their knowledge and also to develop the knowledge together. Okay. All right. So the next one I'd like to discuss is the social theories as part of discussion of the management concepts. Okay. If we think about it further, if you think about the previous concepts further, okay, from social theory perspective, okay, scholars also suggest that, hang on a second, everything that we do, right, in business is actually showing that we are part of the social actors. We are social actors, right? Regardless the roles that we undertake in our social system, okay, either in the business, part of the management team, or the employees, we are all social actors. Therefore, we are all bound to the social theories, right, or the social context, if you like. Okay. Now there are a couple of theories, social theories in here that I'd like to discuss in this instance. They basically help us understanding some connection in the management concepts, and also give us a bit more ideas, if you like, from our action as part of in the social system. Okay, the first one is the institutional theory. Okay, in this theory actually suggests that the environment that the social actors involved can strongly influence the outcomes that the organizations pursue. Okay, so you can refer to the environment in here as the institutional context actually that influence how we behave. Okay, including how the organization needs to action. Okay, so the environment out there influences our organizations, and eventually influences us as part of the members in the organization. Okay, right. Now, that theory basically goes back to the sociological theory that Emile Durkheim suggests. He is one of the prominent sociologists, okay, where he actually suggests that the institutions influences us, the way we do, the way we behave, okay, including the way we operate, right? You can also observe how you behave in your current organization compared to how you behave in the previous organization, for instance, okay? And the organization that you belong to may behave differently to the organizations that you belong to before when it comes to giving response to the institutions, the institutional context, okay? The next one is the social capital theory. There is a good discussion actually some time ago that about the institutional theory. For instance, the scholars like Gabriel Tardy, for instance, actually criticized the institutional theory. Okay? In his view, the institutional theory actually only suggests that we are active. We are the passive members. We are the passive social actors. We kind of receiving the influences that the institutions, the institutional context gives us. Okay, but in real life, the social actors in the institutions, okay, perform the interactions. Okay, each actors in the social context will have the actions one to another. Okay, you can also consider, you can also imagine yourself in the organization that you belong to. You make the interaction, okay, with your friends, with your managers, with your direct reports, okay, and so on and so forth, and to the external organizations such as your customers, your suppliers, okay. And to a larger context, you may also get involved in the interaction with the local government, for instance, okay, or you are related to the your organization is related to the legislator, okay. So in this instance, what the idea of the Tardy's idea actually suggests that. With our interaction, we actually influence the institutions, right? So we are not only receiving the influence from the institutions, but we also influence the institutions, right? In other words, as a social actor, we also have the opportunity to influence the regulation, for instance, by giving the pressures, for instance, okay, or from political perspective, for instance, we also influence who will be our prime minister, for instance, who will be leading us, for instance, in an extreme case, okay. So that's the social capital theory, okay. And social capital itself is actually scholars actually consider social capital as the resources embedded in the relationships, okay. So our relationships, okay, your relationship with your friends, your relationship with the suppliers, with the customers, and anybody, okay, part of the partnership actually become the resources, okay. It is an asset to the organization. All right, so these are the two social theories I'd like to bring to you to help us understanding the management perspective deeper, to look at a bit of foundations, if you like, in terms of understanding the previous theories that we discussed before. Okay, name it the knowledge management, which is basically from social capital theory. You can also argue that the network helps us building the knowledge in the organization as well. Okay. All right. Now let's look at that further a bit more. In the institutional theory, we have two types of institutions, formal and informal. Okay, so there are rules. Okay, the institutional context in here consists of rules, both formal and informal rules. All right, so we live in these institutions. Okay, you in your organization you also have rules, both formal and informal rules. Okay, at the larger at the broader in a broader perspective, your organization also lives in the in both formal and informal rules. Okay, and the institutions reflect the humanly devised constraints, okay, that structure human interaction. That's what they suggest. Therefore, people say that the scholars suggest that our behavior is actually affected by the institutions that we live in. Okay, now the formal rules actually consist of the explicit rules such as the legislation and economic policies. Okay, and the informal rules consist of all implicit rules. Okay, and therefore they are slowly changing. Okay, compared to the formal rules, right? You can, if you can compare the formal rules, for instance, can be cancelled by the next government. Okay, you may recall the carbon tax, for instance, that that the Labour government in Australia introduced, and then it was cancelled by the Liberal governments, the coalition governments, after they took office. Okay, so but in the case of informal rules, such as cultural values and norms, okay, they evolve slowly. Okay, they evolve slowly, right? So these formal and informal rules actually refer to what we call as the pests or macro environmental forces. Okay, that that consists of political, economic, social, cultural, and technological. Okay, you may recall that these pests actually these past forces actually give us pressure, right? Therefore, the critical issue in here from management perspective is to understand how they affect us, okay? How past forces affect us, okay? Affect our business, affect our industry, okay? Because it contains the context where we live in, okay? Now, the informal institutions, let's look at that. We have culture, okay, which is basically a value system that distinguishes the members of one group of culture to the others, okay? And it contains the language, the religion, social structure, okay, that reflects the way the society organizes its members, okay, such as the social class, okay? The education, the ethics, okay, they form the informal institutions, okay. So in the organization, you can also look at the language. For instance, each organization may develop their own corporate jargon, okay, which may be different to the other the other companies, the other organization. Okay, they develop their own vocabulary, if you like. This is what mean, and so on and so forth. Okay, and you can also observe the language or the jargon that that your organization has used compared with the other organization, for instance. Okay, and again, in terms of culture, some scholars are interested in looking at the cultural differences. Okay, therefore they look at the context approach, like high-low context, for instance. Okay, there are some cultures that scholars suggest as the low context. In this instance, the communications actually taken at face value without much reliance on unspoken context. So we just look at the facts that has been spoken. Okay, so it is actually taken at the referring to the facts. Okay, not much reliance on the unspoken context. Okay, in the high context culture, the the communication relies a lot on the underlying unspoken context. Okay, so they also look at the context that is not spoken. So when we look at the when we communicate with people that belong to the high context, okay, the non-verbal message is highly considered in that kind of context. Okay, so for instance, in Japan, for instance, that reflects the high context culture. Instead of saying now, for instance, they may say we'll study it. So more into the context that they communicate. Again, in terms of cultural differences, we also know that some experts try to cluster, okay, but they try to look at the similarities of culture, okay, of culture groups, okay. So they group the countries based on cultural similarities, right? Like us, when we buy products, for instance, we group them based on the similarities, and so I guess this is a simple analogy. So experts also try to understand the cultural similarities to group them, okay, and that leads us to what we call as the cultural proximity, okay, which one is closer to the other one, okay. And there are several types of culture clusters, like Ronan and Shankar clusters, the GLOBE, okay, which is basically the Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness Project. And Samuel Huntington also suggests his own clusters, okay, through reviewing the civilizations. Okay. Now this one here, just briefly, from Ronan and Shankar, in terms of cultural differences, they suggest the Anglo culture, the Arabic culture, Eastern Europe, and so on and so forth, okay, part of the cultural groupings, okay. And the GLOBE projects have the similar approach as well. They have the Anglo, Eastern Europe, and so on and so forth, until the Southern Asia, the Middle East, and Confucian Asia, and so on and so forth. Okay? And Huntington also suggests, based on the what he called as the civilizations, the highest cultural grouping of people and the broadest level of cultural identity people have. Okay? And this is based on Huntington. You can also argue whether these cultural differences, how accurate the cultural differences are, okay, based on your own research, okay. Right. There is another approach in terms of cultural differences. We have what we call as the power distance. Hofstad did the study in Asia Pacific region, referring to one of the global companies, actually. Okay. Now the concept power distance actually reflects the extent to which less powerful member within a country expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. Okay, so there are a few other concepts in the concept under the power distance. Okay, the individualism, for instance, reflects the idea that an individual identity is fundamentally his or her own. Okay, and the collectivism culture actually reflects the idea that the individual identity is fundamentally tied to the identity of his or her collective group. Okay, and then we also have the femininity and the masculinity. Okay, that reflects, you know, whether the relatively weak form of the societal level sex role differentiation. We know that there are studies that suggest job division, division of labor based on gender. Okay, now here the femininity actually suggests a relatively weak form of societal level sex role differentiation, whereby more women occupy positions that reward assertiveness and more men work in caring professions. Okay, and of course the masculinity is the opposite. Okay, right. So that's a few things. Now let's continue the rest in the next session.